Welcome to the One Puff Media Podcast, brought to you by The High Index, bringing you real conversations with people shaping the future of cannabis. Join us weekly to go behind the scenes of tech and innovation powering the plant. Come roll with us. Hey, welcome back to this episode of One Puff Media. How is everyone today? James, how you doing?
Doing great, Alex. How are you?
Doing well. Our guest today is Stu with Brother Processing. Stu, how are you today?
Amazing.
What's up, Stu?
Awesome. So, Stu, first off, thank you for joining us today and being on. You know, the payment processing world is vigorous. It's wild. It's all over the board in the cannabis and hemp space. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your Brother Processing.
Well, I'm a single father at 47. I have a beautiful 5-year-old daughter. She's my life.
Awesome.
And I've been in payment processing for around 25 years. I know I still look young. And I've been running Brother Processing. We're in our 15th year. And about 6 years ago, we decided to pivot our focus to the cannabis industry. And here we are today.
And given the pivot, what kind of, I guess merchant processing on the other side of anything but cannabis, is it relatively straightforward, or are there segments in other industries as far as compliance that you have to deal with like cannabis?
Well, there's definitely other high risk industries that we used to deal with, within gaming or collections or things like that, which usually turned out to be a lot of headaches. And then there's just regular credit card processing for your average restaurant or your average guy selling t-shirts online. And yes, that's a very saturated market, and everybody just talks about how much money they can save.
Was the saturation the main reason for you guys pivoting to the cannabis industry?
Well, it definitely motivated the mind to think of what else can I do here, And the true story is I am in Canada, and before it went legal, everybody was very optimistic with the big cannabis stocks, including companies like Aurora or Canopy and so forth. And it was a big hype, and I had just sold a house and I made a lot of money with Canopy. And next thing I know, there was a trade show that was in Ottawa, an hour drive from me. And I saw that Canopy was actually exhibiting there. I said, hey, let's, give it a shot. Let's go there, see what it's about. And long story short, ended up meeting or seeing Canopy, and I ran to their booth like a kid in a candy store. And I'm like, hi guys, I've made so much money with you and thank you so much. And anyways, I end up sitting down with the CEO of Canopy at the time, who was there. And he just gave me a few words of advice, which were, if you can find some sort of niche in the cannabis industry, you'll do very well. And that's really the story. Ever since that meeting and moment, the plans went into effect to pivot my business towards the cannabis industry.
What are some of the biggest differences between how payments can be processed for cannabis in Canada versus US? Or are they similar?
Well, in certain instances for us, let's say in Canada, we actually specialize in providing payments, debit payments for the Indigenous dispensaries across Canada. And they have these similar challenges as the dispensaries in the US do. However, in Canada, a regular licensed dispensary, they can get a merchant account, with any of the major processors. So it's not as, it's more saturated and not as lucrative, because these merchants who are able to accept Visa and MasterCard, they actually see that 80% of their revenue is debit. And it's not Visa and MasterCard. So it's a different, vertical and looking at license versus the Indigenous. And then, as I said, the Indigenous sort of fall in the same group as the legal dispensaries in the United States.
So can you go into any dispensary in Canada, and use a credit card if you wanted, or does it still have to be cash or cashless ATM?
Debit card
or that? Yeah.
PIN transaction?
No, in any licensed dispensary across Canada, you can go in and pay by a credit card.
That's awesome.
In the United States, you cannot go into any dispensary and pay by credit card. We can discuss further, but you have the ability to accept a debit card.
Sure, sure. And I guess that's what's fascinating about the whole thing is that, everyone knows about 280E. At least if you're in the cannabis space, you have a general understanding of how that's impacting the cannabis industry and the constraints around it. It's always fascinating to me that our neighboring, our hat, if you will, in Canada is doing it in such a more modern way. It just, so I'm guessing you don't have to, when you're a dispensary, you don't have to deal with all the nuances and jump through a bunch of hoops when it comes to how you're going to actually accept money or bank in general in Canada.
No, I mean, they definitely have what is the word, the stigma still out there of being cannabis, location. So not all the banks will offer banking. It is more of a challenge to get a bank account. It's actually probably easier to get a merchant account for a licensed dispensary than it is an actual bank account. And then if you go into other segments of one's business, if someone needs to get a loan or get funding for their business, well, you can't just walk into the bank and say, we're a dispensary and we need money. A lot of them have that stigma still, so they're not going to do it. So they're as well limited in their options. However, to accept Visa and MasterCard, no problem. And same story with legal dispensaries in the United States. Even though they're legal entities, they have issues getting banking. Now, more and more, there are banking solutions out there for dispensary owners, but some of them come with a little bit of an expensive price tag to accept it, to have the bank account. Some banks are charging literally $500 a month, where, me and you might pay 10 or 20 or $30 a month. These banks are saying, you want to bank with us, we'll do everything for you, but it will cost $500 a month.
Wow. That's
Expensive.
steep.
And then you have credit unions around there who are getting out there, and they're doing it at much less of a price, more of a real business, more around the $100 or $90 type of thing. So it's spreading in the US, but in Canada, we're very limited when it comes to banks anyways.
Is it federally legal in Canada?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And I'm not too familiar with the Canada market, but if I understand it correctly, basically the federal government owns all of the cannabis essentially, right? And how they distribute, it's kind of ran like an ABC store, a liquor store in the US. They basically control everything that's grown after harvest.
It is in certain provinces. In others, it's a little bit more liberal. Where I am in Quebec, everything is owned by the government, including the dispensaries. So you can walk into a dispensary, but you can't, and you can pay with your credit card and so forth, but you can't see, touch, or smell the product that you're buying. You can only go off what's on a label. So, same thing, I believe, in Ontario, but in BC, different. You can walk into a store and you can see, touch, and smell type of thing. And of course, why do the Indigenous or the Native people do well in business? Because their prices and the ability to see, touch, and smell is very much there, as if you were in the US as well, where you can, as a consumer, which I am for many, many years, and a grower, so I can appreciate all the, things associated to the plant. It's tough to get, the best products with the government because it is ran, whereas the others, it's not monitored. So, but they happen to get very good product and very good prices.
Do the Indigenous in Canada fall under a different set of rules, regulations, laws, such as they do a little bit here in the United States?
It is exactly the same. They actually fall under their own rules and laws.
And that's how everyone should be, right? Everyone should be allowed to go. And as long as they're not hurting anyone or providing anything illicit, I think that, or anything dangerous and nefarious, I think that people should be allowed to regulate themselves, right? How much easier that would be. And especially when it comes to dispensaries. If I own my dispensary, I should be able to choose whether or not I want to provide deli style options for my consumers, or whether or not I want to have it just packaged behind the counter for safety of my people or safety of the products or theft, whatever it might be. I think that should be more so on the operator, especially when it comes to deli style. I miss those, and I don't think we'll ever really see it on the East Coast like that. I don't think that, I don't think Ohio with their most recent, rec changes, it's not like they're going to start going deli style over in Columbus. I don't see it happening anytime soon, unfortunately.
Well, from your mouth to Mr. Trump's ears.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes just a push. It takes a push to be like, hey, guys, we're just going to let you guys do whatever you want. States, take control. Do whatever you guys want to do and just walk away. It is that simple. It really is that simple.
Yeah, and we don't have to get political, but he already does whatever he wants. So what's the difference here?
It is true. I mean, he's going to do whatever he wants whenever he wants, right? There's all those protests going on. And I live right outside DC, right? And so there's going to be all those protests that are happening this Saturday for his birthday. There's already people that are, a huge advocate of what's happening. They want to be there. They want to support the president and everything's going on for his birthday. And then you have literally everyone else, doing the exact opposite, wanting to burn the place down essentially and prevent this from him having his parade and his party. But I think that's the biggest problem with our country. Not even the political side. It's just the divide about everything. And it's all systemic from the misinformation provided about cannabis to begin with years and years and years ago that's just been perpetuated. And so to me, Canada's fascinating. It's fascinating because it feels like it's on the cusp of where everything should be in the industry, but it's still so heavily regulated. And so I appreciate the native components and the tribal lands here in the U.S. that are at least pushing the boundaries. In the U.S. we have these off-reservation dispensaries opening up now, and that's a huge thing. And I think it's just going to continue going on further. I know my parents in North Carolina are waiting, for dispensaries to pop up closer. And you're seeing it in North Carolina because they've just now put together a committee, right? And an actual government committee to try and help move the needle forward. And I think that it's because they had they had the tribal dispensary open up in a not even a medical legal state. So do you see that in Canada as being kind of that shift that needs to happen as well? Do you think that there needs to be that regulatory change for you guys? And if so, how is that progressing?
I don't think they believe it needs a change. I think it's going to take a few more years of, analyzing data as far as sales and so forth. And I believe soon, because we deal with the Indigenous, I see revenues, I see sales every month, and 80% of my clients are always growing every single month. And there's a reason for that. And I'm here in Montreal, Quebec. If you're not purchasing something online, for example, you have two options. Go to, a Quebec run, dispensary where you can't see, touch, or smell. It's more expensive. The product's not as good. And if you want the great, you're really paying a premium, where otherwise you can just go to the reserves and you can go there and, not to exaggerate, but if you really want to try and smoke one of the marijuanas you're going to buy, they'll give you a piece to roll and go outside and smoke it. So it's a very different experience. And the prices are, I would say, at least a minimum of 33% less than what you're paying at the government.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Really
that's a different level of deli style, right? Here, take this sample, guys. Try it out. Let me know if you want this one. I mean, that's the best kind of deli service I've ever heard.
We don't see that here.
No, not unless you're going to like a flower expo or some kind of event in consumption lounge where, I mean, my favorite kind of events are where they bring in professional rollers, and there's an actual booth and there's two people manning there and they'll roll you up whatever joint you want and they'll give it to you. And that's my favorite kind, because then you're really trying it. You're getting to see the different techniques for rolling and the different mill style grinders, automatic grinders, and then you can have it infused. My favorite kind of parties for sure. As far as the banking goes in cannabis, what do you see as like the biggest problem with traditional banking right now? Not even just in Canada, but also here in the US. What do you personally think the biggest problem is with traditional banking?
Stigma and lack of education. And we just donated a couple months $1,000 to a nonprofit doing cannabis education, and we did it because in indirect way it would help my business, because it would help people start understanding that this is where we're at, and we need to move forward. So it's just, society needs to be educated more on the true benefits of this plant, which, as we all know, dates back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So that's to me the only two things: stigma and education. And education takes away the stigma. So that's where we're at. And we're still a ways, like the fact that it's not being federally legal across the United States, and it's the year 2025, and there's many other countries that have done this. Well, we're the ones saying, yeah, this is still marijuana, and maybe it's not a good product for us to be doing. But if everybody was educated and knew the revenues and the benefits and all these great things for the country, because we're talking about economy as well, well, let's go. This is what the norm is. It's not a crazy thing. People should not be in jail because they had an ounce of marijuana on them. Like, we got to move on. That's what happened.
Given that it's federally legal in Canada, what's the hesitation with the entire banking system, and why aren't all banks getting?
Well, I would say in Canada, let's just say, 4 out of 5 banks will do a bank account. But there is that one bank where if you're in a certain area, this is who you know or whatever, and then they start dealing with credit unions and so forth. So that's been very popular also in Canada. A bunch of credit unions have come into, I guess, play those roles. So like in the beginning, when we have 6 major banks in Canada. I know you guys have hundreds, but with our 6 major banks, I would say in the beginning, 4 of the 6 would not do anything. It didn't matter. And now today, I don't know how many years later, but now, like I said, I would say 5 or 4 or 5 out of the 6 will do it. The
Okay.
others are just sticking away because other people, like the credit unions, took the business, and they want to stick with their little, we're not going to deal with cannabis. So, sometimes you can't change an old person's habits type of thing. So that's what it is. We're going to think this way, and that's it. We're not going to open our shutters.
How
Does
are?
that
Go ahead, Alex.
does that stem from I guess, a propaganda state like was in the US? I mean, we can think back to the US and we can kind of see the history being written with how unjust the whole cannabis aspect was, and how it moved through, and really ultimately how it got black labeled. Was that the case in Canada? Was the market before the legal shift, was it similar to that in the US, where you had a bunch of people smoking weed, a bunch of weed being grown, lots of cannabis, just flowing around? Again, the only experience I personally have from being in Canada are up in Niagara Falls, right? Born and raised in New York, so we'd go over. That's pretty much the only time I spent, and I would love it because the drinking age was 18, so it was way different for us to just go over for a couple hours and go crossed. But at the time, I didn't consume cannabis. I wasn't really interested in cannabis, and that was when I was 17, 18, 19. So what was the market like before the legal shift?
It sounds to me like the exact same as the US, because there was a very big gray market out there. And, Montreal with our winters was very much known. There was, I think, they said something about 5 years ago that there was about 10,000 grow homes in Montreal alone, and we're probably one of the smallest cities in Canada. So, yeah, I mean, people were still smoking, people were still getting it, and it was just being done under a radar that wasn't very, with a slap of the wrist or anything. And
I
if
know
it did,
I
that's
was
what
going
we
to
got.
say my earliest days of growing were definitely ordering seeds online that came from BC, no doubt about it. I was either ordering from across the pond, as they say, or I was ordering from up above in BC, and that's where it didn't matter if I was getting it from Seedsman or whatever company I was buying from. There was a 50-50 shot those seeds were being mailed to me from Canada, and
Yeah, and
that was
BC was definitely ahead of the game of any province or anything. They were, BC was definitely known as a more laid back place.
so they were Canada's California.
Exactly,
Okay,
100%.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, both
So
on the West Coast.
So given that you're shifting to Canada, it seems like, you have a knowledge and passion for the plant, and that dates back to well before it was legal, it seems like. What was it that helped you, I guess, break into the cannabis industry? Was it your background in cannabis, your love for the plant? Did that give you a leg up when you kind of emerged into the cannabis space with other processing?
I would say it was definitely my leg up because I do love the plant and I love the business and I love the industry and I love what I do. So I think that's obviously very important. And what I realized is everybody else that's in the cannabis industry feel the same way. They usually love what they're doing and they have passion for the plant and they want to push education. So the deep and in-depth conversations that I've had with clients or partners or whatever it may be, it's been great. And I can talk like, as they say, the lingo in this business. So yes, it's been an advantage for me because it's something I really know since I'm a teenager. So I have experience also growing my own marijuana. I did it for a year in my basement with 18.
Sounds like you, Alex.
Yeah, well, everyone
I had help
I think everyone has to grow, right? I think it's critical just to understand the plant. I say it all the time. I mean,
and
I
what goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much care, love. I mean,
Yeah.
just grinding, sweat and tears going into it. When one of those plants, gets destroyed by spider mites or you have some kind of outbreak and you're losing, your
Yeah.
premium nugs from mold or mildew, you're like, those are days of sadness for
It
sure.
it teaches you how to handle relationships as well, right? You gotta commit. It's gotta be every day, like, so it's funny.
In the day of the Tamagotchi, right? Your little whatever that thing was that you gave your kids when in the 90s, and it was that little thing. You have to care for it, and it was that tiny little digital thing. It's like that on steroids because it's real, right? Plants that no different. I mean, unless you're just going to go throw a seed out in the ground and just watch it grow and hope it grows, you're gonna get no yield. The plant will be not ideal. I mean, you can still smoke it. There's not much cannabis out there you can't smoke that won't do the job. But yeah, I mean, the love and care that goes in the plant, it's what's going to produce your weight, right? Your yield and make it something really awesome. So I can see that being an advantage for you, just being able to come in and understand and relate to your prospects in a different way than most people can if they're just a banker, right? Or if they're just, hey, I own a credit card processing company. So I can see that as definitely having an advantage.
And I also, sorry, just to add, I also invested some money into a dispensary chain called the Emerald in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I knew the woman from a few years ago that I advertised in her magazine. And she's like, I'm opening up some dispensaries. You should invest. We're going to do very well. And we did. And it took about 2.5 years. So I can also relate as to any dispensary owner who are usually the people I need to speak to. I can relate to the process that they go through because it's very challenging. And that's why I tell all my clients, if they're a dispensary owner, I don't know if anybody's told you, but you should pat yourself on the shoulder because you've accomplished something that most people can't.
What is it makes sense with being a dispensary, and that's awesome that you invested in that and have a little piece of New York going on there. That's pretty sweet. That's ultimately my goal. Hopefully Virginia comes around. Then I don't have to move to allow that opportunity to come. Given that you're most people processing payments or needing assistance from a company like yours is on the dispensary side. What does it look like for cultivators or growers who are selling their cannabis, whether it be wholesale or direct to those dispensary? What kind of payment processing solution do you provide to that kind of person? Or is it just standard invoicing?
We have a few clients that are on that side of the business. The solutions are more catered to like a bank to bank type of solution or an ACH type of solution because they're usually dealing with much larger average tickets. So, our debit solution, I believe, has a limit of $1,000 a transaction. And these guys are doing 20, 25, 50, it's larger amounts. Not as common, and from what we hear, a lot of it is still today in cash.
That's scary. It's just it's insane to think about the cost of buying a
Sure.
few pounds at wholesale, right? And it it just takes us back. It takes the whole industry back to where that was the only recourse, right? I mean, when you want to go buy a pound 20 years ago, you better have a lot of cash, all right?
Yeah,
Or you better you better have a lot of trust in the person that's giving you a little IOU.
yeah.
But it's bananas to me that that is still the world that we live in today, that we have this $1 billion industry and everything has to be cash. Like it's crazy to me. How do you go about, I guess, if you have a handful of cultivators on and they're handling more of wholesale, more just a large transaction, that direct ACH, and then you have those individual dispensaries and a lot of smaller transactions, how does the process look like for onboarding, one of those clients versus the other for you guys? Is it a similar process?
No, actually, fortunately, it's a much easier and quicker process, because for the dispensary owners, we're again just setting them up with a solution that only accepts debit. So at the end of the day, there's only so much risk and liability. And so most accounts are usually onboarded within a turnaround with the terminal at their location. I would say within a 3 or 4 business day period.
Quick. That's a quick turnaround.
Sure is.
So I guess with that, outside of standard merchant services, is there anything else that brother processing offers to its clients, or anyone, I guess, outside of that license operator? Do you guys also serve other aspects of the industry?
Yes, great question. And we do that for, again, another reason. I mean, the main reason is any way we can help our clients is a plus for us because at the end of the day, the better these clients do in business, the better we do. So we have actually partnered with a few different type of vendors, one being in funding for dispensary owners, and these guys cater to that industry, as well as a free consult with our cannabis consultants who range from all different services that they can offer, and they do not charge for their services. And we also actually recently partnered with a vendor that can help cultivators and so forth as well, growers, because we have the ability in certain states to help people on their electrical bill. So we just ran into obviously one of our clients who had his own grow up as well, and he mentioned he was spending $20,000-$30,000 a month just on electricity.
That's crazy.
So when he
The
heard
biggest
that,
bill, right? That's the
yeah,
biggest bill for cultivators is the electric.
so when he heard we can potentially help him with that as well, that's when he's like, "Wow, these guys really care about our business." So he was blown away just by that. And the last is we have marketing and payroll partners as well that are very much in the cannabis industry, and they all want to come into the market and focus on this niche.
You mentioned the company coming in and helping out in instances and providing funding. It reminds me of like some old commercial I remember hearing. It's playing in my brain and I can't remember the actual words, but it was like AG Wentworth, need cash now or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Know exactly what you're talking about.
Need cash now.
My young son that always wondered why we weren't calling that number.
Right.
Growing up, he's like, "Dad, he's giving away free cash."
cash.
Free money, guys. It's weird that is like, that's an actual industry need, and it's a real service, right? Like, hey, do you need help with your payroll? Do you need help paying your bills? And there are companies just giving away cash on these lending basis. And it's just, again, it goes back to the fact that I can't believe this is how we operate in so many instances, but it's that cash kind of focus that's really doing it. What feedback are you getting from those operators as far as how risky it is with such a cash heavy system? Do people reach out to you and say, hey, we need a better solution? And you ultimately have to say, hey, this is what you got. You got to deal with it. What does that look like?
Well, amongst, after our debit solution is in place and all the other services that we can bring to the table, we usually fit their pain points. So I don't see much issues because now and I say we ride this wave because soon everybody will smell the coffee and realize this is a very good and growing industry. So, the guys who are offering the funding today and are focused on the cannabis industry, in my mind, they have the right business mindset. This is only an industry that it is at its infancy, in my opinion. We're only at our infancy because this could it will in time just continuously blow up.
Yeah, yeah, I agree as well. I think we're so infant. I think that we are part of the history that's being made. The companies that we're creating, the conversations that we're having, I think all of it is necessary to remove that stigma and to keep everything moving forward. And I think anyone who's in the industry really wants to be in the industry, right? It's not as glamorous as what everyone thinks. It doesn't matter who I talk to outside the industry. If they're not in it, they see it, they're like, you sell cannabis? You sell weed? And it's like, what? How did you get that from the high index of data aggregation company, right? But I still have these conversations today, and it's crazy to me.
Is Canada further ahead than we are? Like when you're talking infancy, right? Like both of our countries are still in the infancy stages, but would you
Yeah.
say Canada's further ahead than the US?
Yeah. Yeah. Only because we're federally legal across our country.
The big question is, are you guys ahead on quality? Right? That's the big one. Because I've never
I would
smoked
say
any
so.
cannabis products or consumed cannabis products. So
From Canada.
From Canada.
Yeah, from Canada, Alex, let's be clear.
from Canada, yes.
Okay. Well, I invite you to try it.
Yeah, I mean that's
And
the
you
best
and you
testament, right?
and yes, and you might change your mind.
How much you mentioned pricing earlier, and not to go too far back, but what you were mentioning that some of the spots were 30% less than
The
the
Indigenous ones.
yeah, the indigenous ones in comparison to the packaged, can't see it, can't smell it. What is the average consumer cost for like an ounce? Does it vary drastically from one side to the other? As far as locationally?
I would say, the government stuff. If you're looking for that quad A type of thing, ounce, you're probably over $200 Canadian. And if you were to go to native, then we're probably talking about 150 at most. But I would say like around $130 for a good quality ounce, where you'll be like, wow, this is nice buds, smells good, looks good, smokes well, and it's $130. But at the government, you're going to go, you can't be sure anyways, but it's going to be over $200.
How high are the taxes for consumers comparatively to the US? Is it comparable?
Yeah, and it's different. We don't have necessarily. Well, actually, I can't tell you that for sure. In Canada or Quebec, we already have a high sales tax of 15%. But I can't tell
Flat,
you.
like a flat tax across the board on everything, or just
Yeah,
cannabis?
no, everything.
Okay.
That is steep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very steep. So it's been a while since I've been in a licensed dispensary. So I don't know if there's another like surcharge or whatever on there. If it is, it's definitely minimal because, like I said, in Quebec, we're already at 15%. So that's already being charged on top, and that's already going to the government.
So you want to just yell at everyone in Canada and say, suck it up. You're going up another 6%. Suck it up, guys. We're at 15 up here. Right.
Right.
I know they're about to hit that shift here in September.
But
So
if you go to native, so not only are we talking about the difference in price of 33%, we're going to have to add another 15% because guess what? In native reserve, there is no tax.
Further incentive to go to the reserve to buy.
So
that's
not
what we're going to
only
see
are
here
you
in the
saving
US too.
So not only are you saving the tax, you're saving the difference from government to native.
I remember growing up in my hometown in upstate New York, we had the Turning Stone Casino. And I want to say it opened up at some point when I was a child. It wasn't there in my entire life. And then it opened up and it kind of exploded as far as the jobs that were offered, as far as the people that were going there. And I remember when I first started going to the casino, you can go when you were 18. And I had an opportunity to go there a couple of times and enjoy it, right? And gamble legally. It was super cool. But the amount of people that would travel so far to come there just to buy cigarettes because there was no tax. I can see the exact same thing starting to happen right now, especially in that same exact location, that same casino, Turning Stone Casino in upstate New York. Now it's everywhere. So now they own a bunch of cannabis dispensaries all over. The biggest one that I've seen up there is called like the Reserve, I think. And they had this incredible like handmade wooden door. I mean, it's a really cool location. But yeah, I mean, people are going there. And I think that because of New York in general and how it's been, gosh, how the rollout for legal cannabis has not been the way that it should have been, that it's just further driving that kind of tribal purchases, the dispensaries owned by reservations. I mean, why wouldn't you go there, right? It's the really big question from a consumer standpoint. And I know we talked about this a few weeks ago with Cam about, the way to increase customer loyalty and things like that. I think with an economy like we have now, most people just, they want to know they're getting a good product at a great price. And so, people are going to drive an extra 5 minutes. They're going to order online from somebody who's cheaper. And I think that's further adding to the price compression component. But if you don't have to pay taxes on it, nobody's going to go to a place that you're going to pay 33% more plus 15% in tax. I mean, where's the incentive? Unless they're just really gung ho about providing their tax to the government, right? Unless they're like, hey, we really want to help out
Right.
the government, so let's go buy our stuff there. Are you seeing a huge shift now with more tribal dispensaries opening up and more kind of one-off instances and more options to obtain cannabis in Canada? Are you seeing kind of a shift or like a real downturn in sales in these government-owned dispensaries?
Well, as I mentioned, I can tell you that I see the Indigenous dispensaries growth every month.
How many are there, Stuart, compared to government-owned dispensaries in Canada? Do you know that ratio or those
I
numbers?
don't know the ratio. I can tell you there's about 700, I think, at most, Indigenous dispensaries across Canada. You guys can do that in one state. So there's that. And the legal dispensaries, I mean, I can tell you in 2 seconds, but,
I'd be
here.
curious just to know. I mean, I would imagine that the Indigenous ones would continue to grow at a rate that far exceeds the government ones.
I believe it is equivalent. Oh yeah, it does it by different province. It won't give me no single number.
See, this is why we got to put Canada dispensaries and data in our system. We have the people, but we haven't generated the Canada map of licenses
Right.
for the high index yet. But I'm really excited when we launch the international component so that we have these. I mean, what we're going to create is this massive global ecosystem of cannabis. I can't
It
wait.
says as of January 2024, 3,600 legal recreational cannabis storefronts in Canada.
Does that include Indigenous or is that just the government owned?
Just the government.
Okay. So it's
That's
about
actually
5 to 1.
more than I thought, actually.
Yeah.
It's more than I thought, just because the infrastructure is so government driven. I thought maybe we're less. I don't know.
Can the government limit the amount of Indigenous
I don't
dispensaries, or
No.
they don't have a say so in that?
think so. They can't do anything.
Some of these Indigenous owners have opened up locations on non-native lands, and those guys, yes, they're playing, in the gray area and, definitely get raided and so forth. And sometimes they'll pop up 2 days later, and sometimes you won't see them again.
And have you guys helped businesses like that? I guess if there are, gray operations that are up, that are selling to consumers in Canada, is that similar to the kind of crackdowns that we're seeing in LA and New York and some of these kind of Wild Wild West style states? Does that happen in Canada as well? And does government come in and crack it down?
No, not at all in Canada. It's rare these days. We've, go back 5 years, sure, but today, no. And you asked, have we helped an Indigenous owner, accept payments on non-native land? Yes. And in the US as well. But at the end of the day, again, with our debit solutions, we don't have to listen to Visa and MasterCard. We don't have to deal with what they have to say in these situations. We're listening to the debit, and there's, again, such a benefit to using it that way.
Have you ever? No, sorry. Go ahead, James.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask. One of the things when we were first getting started, Stuart, or right before, we were evaluating Square and evaluating Stripe, and we really liked the functionality on the back end that both of those offered. We could go in, create our own discount codes, add users. It was very easy. We could do everything in the push of a button. Authorize.net is obviously, is not like that. And we've had to create some workarounds because we were shut down by Stripe. We were shut down by Square. Do you guys find those, or Stripe or Square, your competition in Canada, or are they not even in the Canadian market?
No, they are also in the Canadian market. And we always joke that if we had $1 for every time we heard that a Square or Stripe account was shut down, we would do very well.
You wouldn't even need your existing business.
Exactly.
So they shut down their services for businesses in Canada where it is federally legal.
Correct.
Why?
Well, sorry, federally legal, but let's say it was an Indigenous dispensary that was able to do it. That's not really legal for Visa and MasterCard. They always, Stripe and Square are really known to small businesses because they don't charge a monthly fee and they just charge a high discount rate, but they're known to basically auto approve merchants. So if you're not doing more than $50,000 a month in volume, 9 times out of 10, your account gets approved. And then within the next weeks, months, even sometime years, an underwriting team goes through the files, sees who they really are, sees what their location is, and smells cannabis or smells psychedelics or smells something that's just not regulated. Bye-bye. Your account's closed. We're not giving you any notice. Your account is closed, and we're holding whatever funds we have of yours for the next 6 months in case any chargebacks come in or whatever. And you can have a clean chargeback history where you've never had a chargeback up to date, but they're still going to say, we need to hold this money. So people end up, it's usually just a day or two of settlements, but it's still someone's money that was paid for services. So sometimes they can call, or I've assisted people to call there and just get a little aggressive and say, you don't really have a right. There's no history. So please release the funds. And a lot of times they did. But to even have to go through that with a processor, you're running a business, you're doing everything else you need to do. Payments is supposed to be a smooth sailing operation. And all of a sudden you get a call and everything's shut down. Everything has to be paused. So the minute you pause is the minute you lose money. So it's not a great story for a lot of people.
So you guys, is there an equivalent to Authorize.net in Canada, or is it the exact same thing?
Same thing.
Okay.
They're a very large gateway provider.
It's just so crazy to me that Visa and MasterCard essentially hold the keys to everything about our society. And I think back to, was it like last year or something? I was watching Visa, MasterCard, and a couple other credit card processors, and the actual credit cards themselves, like interviewed and pretty much hammered, like on the Hill in front of a Senate hearing committee. And it's really staggering how they've monopolized the world for transactions. And when you really break it down, it is staggering that there's not many things that can move, and why I'm such a huge proponent of and an advocate for crypto, because of the get away from the system kind of component, defrag and kind of damn the man reality, because they really do hold the keys to pretty much everything, and they are the ones saying who can be lended to, what kind of credit you have. They are the ones who dictate whether or not your business is going to get funding, or if, a lender is going to give it to you. And I think that's just, it's pretty wild.
I totally like agree. And I've always thought of it, and people are like, oh, it's so great. Jeff Bezos and Amazon and Mark Cuban and all these people, whoever created Visa or MasterCard, they are geniuses. Whoever put that into first play, whatever amount of time it was ago, they, like you said, they control a lot of stuff and a lot of data also. And they make money on the consumer end, and they make money on the merchant end. And it's just, it's everything. It's beyond. It must be in the trillions of dollars.
Has to be. If there was like a real Illuminati, Visa and MasterCard, whoever, they're controlling it, right? I mean, the reality is you can't do anything without it. And it's not like you and I can go start up a credit card company, or if we wanted to start up a bank, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, like other people did, and this is what we're going to do. Well, that's not really an option anymore. Not unless you're going to work with Visa and MasterCard. You have to work with those companies. There is no way around it. And I think that was the biggest takeaway for me when they were on that Senate hearing, was they asked that question point blank. Well, hey, if there's another option for a business to use a different merchant service, what is it? You're saying that there's these other options, but they can't actually use those because the fees are astronomically too high because you control the market.
Is
Right?
crypto an option in Canada?
Yeah, some people work with crypto. It's again, in Canada we deal a lot more with the Indigenous, so something like crypto, if we're behind, like, the Indigenous are behind, and not many are involved with the crypto. In the US, I find it way more common. And people are like, "Oh, I can take a settlement in crypto, sure." So yeah, I find it a lot more common in the US.
What kind of compliant trends are you paying attention to as far as what the shift is? As we talk about crypto, as we talk about these guys really having a stronghold on the system, what kind of things are you seeing and kind of watching as a next possibility for the industry?
Um, honestly, like I said before, we always say we're riding this wave with our debit solution. Because one of the benefits is, with a big benefit to this, unlike any other retail environment, the merchant owner dispensaries, not only are they not paying, fees to accept a form of payment, they're actually earning, a kickback in certain situations, and actually make money. Fast forward 10 years or 5 years, whatever it may be, and we go legal, and then, 50% of the banks get involved. And now people are starting to be like, oh, now you can accept credit cards because it's, federally legal. So that's why we're creating all these added values with our clients, because moving forward, in 5 years now, if credit card regular merchant services are available, we know that our clients will come to us. So that's really the only thing we're looking at. We've seen people saying negative things about our solution, but it's a solution that's been around for 10 years, and it continues to be. And at this point, it's what works. So not much when it comes to actual compliance. I leave that up to the banks and processors, and to make sure that whatever service I'm offering is. But of course, we do our own due diligence, and we're satisfied with where we stand.
And how would federal banking, if things did change and that federal reform did happen, how would that affect your business and your clients specifically? Would it be a good thing or would it be a bad thing?
Sorry?
So, like, if the federal banking did have some major reform, how would that affect your business? I mean, it would obviously be in the positive, I would think, for the most part, right?
No, because like I said
You're
before,
handled on that debit side, yeah.
yeah, and we're doing well, and the merchants are doing well. So if they all of a sudden find out they have to pay fees, then we start playing that game where we have to try to do our best to give them the lowest rates possible, and and so forth. So, and then it becomes a thing that constantly needs to be upgraded.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a different kind of race to the bottom, right? Everyone would be trying to undercut everyone else's fees just to get the services. Yeah, I could see that as being a total headache.
But we're very confident that with the relationships that we establish with our clients, if there's another solution, the first place they'll come is to us.
Yeah. And that makes sense because you've been around. You've got over, what'd you say, 9, 10 years that you've been doing this in the cannabis space. I think that speaks volume. And it's those kinds of businesses that really help, people align, make sure their companies are aligned with a business that has similar values. With everything happening, not necessarily on the reform side, but on the tech side with crypto, with AI, what are some of the biggest like fintech innovation opportunities you're seeing in the cannabis space?
Well, there's certain other solutions that are being worked on to become more and more compliant. Can't really go into much detail about them at this point. And of course, AI or my best friend ChatGPT has, definitely helped out the business in many ways.
Yeah, I think that with AI coming about, the way and how aggressive it has been kind of just rolling through. I was thinking about it this morning when I was driving around. How nice it would be if just AI, the chat GPT world just turned off. I think you'd see a different level of authenticity, if you will, that's really shown in social media, how people are interacting, even so with just AI filters in general and people providing these fake faces when they're doing their whatever it might be. I think that AI is doing a great job helping people con people in so many different ways. And so hopefully we see something good come out of it. Obviously there's a lot of good happening, but I think for most general population of people, it's all being used to, I don't know, pull the wool over someone's eyes all the time, all the time.
Very deceptive.
Very deceptive. I don't
From
know.
LinkedIn ads to, just
It's
in
a
every facet of everything.
it's insane to me. It used to be 5, 10 years ago when they first started coming out with TikTok filters. You could say, oh, that person, that's not makeup. They got some kind of filter on that
Right.
makes them look that much younger, that much more attractive, whatever it is. And then fast forward to today, half the people aren't even people. They're not even real. And so I think it's interesting, just the overall kind of process. And I often wonder if it's going to change kind of how cannabis operates, right? How the industry operates. And we were talking about it a couple weeks ago, right, James? And somebody mentioned us. They have some AI driven camera that goes in the grow rooms and then just goes up and it can just determine at any time if that plant has mildew or is deficient on a pH or what, and it's
Yeah.
just looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, different levels of tech is just bananas to me. So that I see perfect needs for AI, right? I think it'll help, prevent a lot of remediation of cannabis and help increase your yield and maintain your ROI on your grows. So hopefully it can evolve to somewhere that it's real versus just fake. But it would be fun to see just all of a sudden ChatGPT stops working and you're
Yeah.
like, and it's just like, who's actually writing what these days, right? Like, who's coming up with the content that you see? Because I think all these people that have tens of thousands of followers in many instances, they wouldn't have them. They wouldn't exist, right? So I kind of appreciate that reset if it were to happen for a number of reasons. Society would be better off. But I guess as we look to wrap this up and not go off on too many technology tangents, for somebody evaluating their individual payment solution, what's one thing that they should be asking that they probably aren't?
I would only imagine that these statements that merchants get are usually made to be complicated to figure out exactly what they're paying at the end of the day. So I would just get anybody to make sure that they know what they're talking about and that they can provide you with an apple to apple comparison with any fee listed there to make sure that there's nothing hidden that you're not questioning.
Yeah, that makes sense. We were talking about this earlier, right? And we've been evaluating just as we've gotten off the ground with the high index, what's the best solution for us? What rates make sense for us? And trying to actually understand it. And it wasn't until we looked at our first statement that we really understood what we were paying for. So I think that was just eye-opening in itself. It's one thing if you're just everyone swiping a car and buying a $1.99 soda, right? But when you're talking about subscriptions, you're talking about different dollar amounts, different credit cards being used. I had no idea that we were being dinged a higher rate for a corporate card versus a personal card versus a debit card versus a credit card versus Amex versus Visa. It's just it's pretty bananas that there is no standardization with just, hey, I want to buy something, let's just pay for it. No. This one instance, more fees. This one, less fees. I think that just it overall adds to the complexity of it and the confusion that you're just talking about, because it's definitely confusing to me. I looked at it and I'm like, nah, I'll stick with,
Well, I
option
like what
sales.
Stu said earlier, before we started recording this. He's like, hey, look at your statement, look at the total amount you paid, divide that by your sales, and that gives you your effective rate.
Yeah.
And so
It's an easy way to look at it.
Yeah. And then, like I said to you guys, if it's above 3.5% with what you guys do, it's something that should be reviewed. If it's under it and well under it, then you guys are in a good place.
I'm going to immediately go do that after we get off this call, because we just got our most recent statement the other day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Stu, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's been phenomenal having it on. And I would say, what would you recommend, or how would you recommend anyone wanting to work with you to get started in reaching out to you? What's the best channel for people to get in touch with you?
Best channel is really calling my direct cell phone. I'm not hidden between different phone numbers and extensions and Google Meets and whatever it is. I have a Canadian cell phone and an American cell phone. Both can be reached at. In Canada, 514-944-1452. And in the US, 305-904-1452.
And just to
Awesome.
confirm, you guys are set up to do business in both Canada and the United States.
Correct.
And in your website is brotherprocessing.com, right?
That is correct as well.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Stu, it's been a pleasure. I could riff on the industry all day, and I love learning about the aspects of the Canada market. I had no idea. Really refreshing to hear that we're not the only ones getting screwed by the government, right? Unfortunately for you guys.
Well, let's hope some people listen and we pass them along this education.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time as we spotlight more people and innovators pushing the industry forward. And until then, thank you for rolling with us.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.